So I took some pressed flowers and I put them in resin to make this little hollow skull. First I had to make a silicone mold of the skull, and then I just filled it up and only did the outside so that it would be nice and hollow. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. So I got a bunch of pressed flowers while I was out in Hawaii, where I mostly just stayed in this leopard robe the whole time.
You have to soften it emotionally and then physically. Bash its head into the cement.
And I just want those to be a little resin skull. So I got that skull off of Amazon and reuse it to make the mold. Oh, that would be cool. The part I'm worried about is right here on the jaw where there's that little gap, because the mold would just like get stuck in there and I wouldn't be able to pull it out. So if I like do it down the side and do two different ones, one on the bottom here and then one on the top, that should work. So I just put out a video where I showed how to make silicone molds using stuff from home. And this method is just used with cornstarch and then your silicone from like hardware stores. So I mushed it on and made sure it went halfway through that hole, and that's gonna be kind of like the seam, and we're gonna work it all the way around the skull on half of that skull on that seam. And that seems great. That seems fantastic. So I basically have it covered everywhere I want. I want to get it a little bit like lower, and also it was like kind of thin in some spots, and so I took some more of that silicone putty stuff and just added another layer and made sure it went down across the like jawbone there, and I covered some of the stuff in eyes. But I found out that if you wait too long to put on that second layer, it just peels right off, so that's not good. So with that off, I was gonna do it again with more fresh piece. See, it was still sticking to my fingers, and so I just spread it on across so it's still all oopy and goopy. And then I took my hands and dipped it in some of that cornstarch and just patted it on top. Did the same thing here. Who left my guacamole out? That looks like guacamole. And just patted it down with that cornstarch hands and made sure it was like pretty evenly across the whole skull. And yeah, looking pretty good. So here on the edge, I took little grooves, or I cut little grooves out. So that way when I do the second half, it kind of has like a puzzle piece, like it fits in nice and snug, and hopefully won't like move around as much. So cool. Next I took some more of that cornstarch and kind of just put a layer on it on top, hoping that it will make it so it won't stick to each other. Added it and made sure it was down in those grooves, and just worked the grooves all the way around the skull. Added some more to some of the spots that were kind of thin, and nice little layer of that cornstarch. So while that dries, I'm gonna try to get this jaw all worked out, and I figured if I just like covered it and then left like the bottom part exposed, that should technically work, but we'll see. So now that's all dry, let's peel it off and see how well we did. I don't know how much that like little layer of cornstarch did because it was still kind of a pain to peel off, but looking good. As for the top, I feel like I was like holding my breath the entire time that I was pulling this out, and broke right in my eye. So I popped that out, and then to reattach that to the mold, I just took some silicone right from the old bottle, put it in there, used my fingers again, and just shoved it on. Should I be using my fingers? Should I be wearing gloves? Yeah, you'll see later. I can't wait for the comments. You little sweethearts always looking out for me. Checking on that bottom piece with a flashlight, I could see that there's a bunch of like thin spots, and so I'm gonna have to go back over that and thicken that up. And so I just marked it with a marker, kind of the areas that I thought could use some thickening, and then put the skull back on, and then just washed off that layer of cornstarch, and with the oopy goopy just stacked it on there. More of that cornstarch hands, and let's see how that jaw did. So as I was doing it, I broke the little jaw, and realized that what I need to do is cut out that little part otherwise it's not gonna come out. Cut it out even more so I can get out nice and easy. If it's gonna be hard to get out this job piece now, when it has resin, it's just gonna be just as hard without breaking it. So those cuts should help. So in Hawaii, I bought this cute little notebook so that as I saw flowers, I could press them. Wish I had more, but it'll do. So I sprayed the mold with a little mold release and wiped down the excess. And then the resin I use is UV resin. That way it would harden a little quicker. I just put some in there. I ended up putting too much because when I put the flowers in there and like kind of washed it around there, it would just like move. And then when I used the UV light, it would harden and harden on the top, and then I moved it because I'm a silly boy and it got all wrinkly. So I figured the best way to do it is just like one at a time. Not one at a time, but kind of just like one side at a time. And yeah, I should be wearing gloves. Resin's not great for your skin. It's not great for your skin, so you probably shouldn't touch that resin right now. Look at him go. He is just touching that resin with his hands. But really, this was like the best method. If I were to do it again, I'd probably use like a paintbrush or something and just kind of brush it on there. Do a little layer, and then put on the flower, and then another layer. And there's some spots that are really hard to get to, like under the eye things and on top. But overall, pretty stoked with how it looked. So now to do that bottom. And it was a lot easier because it wasn't like, I don't know, so circular. It was kind of more flat. So I did that all over. Used the UV resin light to make it nice and hard. And same game plan for the jaw. So I put a small little layer there at the bottom of the teeth. Added some flowers and poked them on in. Used the light to harden it. And then I added the rubber bands. Or like I kind of shoved some flowers and whatever in there first. And then we'll add some resin afterwards, and hopefully that will work. So resin, usually the ratio is 1:1, mixed it on up. I wish I would have been more accurate, but like I think I had a little bit more hardener than I did the other stuff, whatever. So I added it in, and then I'm gonna try to squeeze it there on the corners, hopefully get rid of any air bubbles. Add some more, and we're gonna let that sit. Then with all the leftover resin that we had, I just poured it on in that there skull, put on the bottom, then added a bunch of rubber bands to hopefully hold it in place. And then I'm just gonna continually rotate the skull just like in random directions to try to make it stay hollow. And so it's not like thicker in one spot of the skull. And I actually took it home and did it for like another 5 hours. So before we take this apart and see how it looks, Pastor has a little something to say. Look at this little gremlin. Look at him. He is a cutie. Also a little shit, but we love him. See the resemblance? So huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. So I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Figuring out something you love to do, and then figuring like how to make money off of it feels kind of like a double-edged sword. Because as soon as it becomes your job, your work, it kind of takes a little bit of like the fun and the passion out of it. Because then you have to start worrying about like all the other things that comes with owning and running your business. One of the things is running a website and your online presence. Squarespace has taken a huge load off of my plate because of how easy and simple it is to make a website using Squarespace and to run it. So not only is it gonna be easy, but also take the pressure off of like having to learn coding and all the other stuff, but also it's gonna look professional and nice. And because everything is so customizable, it's also gonna be very on brand to what you wanna do. So I'm sure you have something that you're stoked about, your passion. So with Squarespace, you can make an online store. They have like an image editor built into the site. They have tons and tons of templates for you to pick from, and all of it with a very easy to run user interface. And if questions do arise, they have a help center where they have an award-winning customer care team to help you out. So one of my favorite things about Squarespace is you can actually go to the link in the description and you can start making your website for free today. You can build it out exactly how you want it to look just like you want. Then when you do decide to launch it, or if you want to buy a domain, you can get 10% off by going to that website, squarespace.com/schmood, or by using the coupon code schmood. Go do what you love what you do. I was looking at my hands as if like I have something written on them, I don't. And let Squarespace help you out and help take off any pressure that you may get from doing so. So cool. And there's a little bit of flour left there in the skull, and so I was gonna have to fix that little goop. That's kind of where it was all wrinkly. So I just placed the flour there, then put some of that UV resin on top and just sealed it on up. I also was like, it was kind of goopy, again, because I didn't have the ratio perfect, and it was like cloudy in some spots. And so I just took some acetone and wiped it off, and then shaved down the spots that I thought needed it. Added a little bit of spots that it was like too thin, and I saw that it made it really glossy, so we'll use that later. I also took a razor blade to get rid of the seam where I had the two silicone molds meeting. I also had to use some clippers in some spots because it was real thick. Also right there, right where the hole was, kind of gooped up, but I cleared that out. And I thought it'd be cool to like take a tooth out, but I ended up hating that, so I just put it back in and kind of made it a little wonky. On the jaw, it wasn't sealed quite good enough on the rubber band, so it leaked. So I had to fill it up with some of that UV resin and seal it, but we'll see how it goes. I don't know what happened, but the teeth there just did not form. But it gave me an idea to, like, instead of teeth, to actually have flowers go. And so I put some of that UV resin there, and then I would hold the flower up as I hardened the resin to make it stand up. I thought I gave it a cool effect. So we'll do that more to that. And then also to make it all shiny, I just added a little layer of the UV resin on top and then smeared it around there with the paper towel and ended up making it really nice and glossy and clear. So really stoked with how that turned out. It's still a little sticky and tacky, but I kind of like how that looks. As for the jaw, I'm actually really stoked that it didn't work out, and so I could give it those flowers. And it does fit, but I don't want the skull resting on those flowers and smudging them. So we're just gonna put it there on top of the head, wear it as a crown. And we're gonna call this cute little piece the Terrestrial King, and say that it's like a self-portrait of me and my cute little existential dread and crisis that I'm going through. So, fun. But for reals, I think this might be one of my favorite pieces that I've made. Hope you guys love it. Give it some love if you like it. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this piece, actually. I'd love to sell it, but I know I'd want like some stupid amount for it. So might just hold on to it for now. Alright, so be sure to like and subscribe. Go ahead and hit that bell notification. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, and thanks so much for my patrons.